Over the last few years, the majority of rugby fans in Europe could be divided very neatly into two categories. Those who are slightly ashamed to admit it, but are finding Leicester Tigers' demise hilarious. And those who are not ashamed to admit it, but are finding Leicester Tigers' demise hilarious. Of course, there are Tigers fans as well, and I do genuinely feel a level of both pity and, as an Ospreys fan, understanding, but it's hard not to at least be mesmerised and transfixed by the sheer firestorm unfolding in the East Midlands. Yet Leicester aren't the only team in crisis in the Premiership. It's an equally objectively funny story over at Saracens, only you don't have any fans to contend with, as European rugby's joyless overlords were caught with their hands in 1.1 million cookie jars. And then we have Bristol on the exact opposite end, the millionaire squad still holding a place in everyone's hearts thanks to their mad shit brand of rugby. Sale Sharks are inexplicably not in sixth. I don't know what that's all about. Northampton are good again, but in the kind of way that still frustrates fans. God knows what's going on at Wasps. And somewhere, in some recently reopened pub, someone is whispering the immortal words that mean the Premiership can finally kick back off. It could be Gloucester's year. This year's Damon Albarn's Premiership is so stuffed with stories you'd think it's a car park, and with the season due to resume very, very soon, it's time to dive right in and assess the state of play and stories to come in the 2020 Jarvis Cocker Premiership. At the top of the tree are the Exeter a team who pride themselves on being a representation of everything good about rugby. This is a team built very carefully over 11 years by perhaps one of the smartest thinkers in the game, Rob Baxter. Everything about Baxter, from his words to his haircut, is concise and deliberate, yet undeniably effective. Exeter are perhaps one of the most fascinating teams in World Club Rugby because nothing quite matches up. Everything you can say about them is instantly met with a contradiction, and yet that just proves their real strength. The are thought of as a bash and grind team, and yet had scored 48 tries in just 13 games prior to the season's suspension. However, 29 of those 48 tries came from phase play mere inches out, and for that stat, I only counted scores where the last ruck was within 5 metres of the line, so even bombastic forward efforts like these don't count. Exeter are the most effective bashers and grinders out there, yet this isn't the full story. The have an excellent backline, and it's made up largely of, actual magicians. Look at all the tries by their pace boys, and you'll see almost exclusively individual scores by the likes of the most Irish-sounding Englishman to ever play for the Ospreys, Tom O'Flaherty here, or the only Scot on Warren Gatland's Christmas card list, Stuart Hogg here. There are very few tries coming directly from backs linking up. However, there's a good reason for this, and it leads to a fascinating innovation from Exeter that other teams are just beginning to steal. Now, in about 2015 through to 17, virtually every team started copying a shape I believe originated in New Zealand, known as the 1-3-3-1, which just dictates how you set your forwards out. I've talked about this an awful lot. It gives your team shape, it organises your attack efficiently. Two groups of 3 forwards, 2 forwards on the great rugby, all of that. However, in the years since these structures broke through, things have really started to get exciting, as more and more coaches have started to put their own twists on it. And Rob Baxter and Ellie Heffers is very interesting. Now, kudos to rugby passer Ben Smith for first bringing this to my attention in an article he published last year, but the basic idea is instead of forwards standing lateral to each other, they stand one behind each other. The forwards are stacked instead of grouped in pods. The numbers are the same, but the shape is different. Most modern teams would leave an option or two between the ruck and the 10 to help just hold a defender's eye line. Instead of wasting a body, Exeter detached the stack, and one of their 3 forwards targets this space, whilst the others pick different lines, changing their intention and purpose, yet they remain part of the standardised 3-man group. These aren't just forwards either. Exeter will happily drop a centre or a winger into either of the threes in the 1-3-3-1 amongst the bigger units to keep things fresh. This means the defence isn't sure what kind of threat they're facing, nor where that threat is headed. However, this isn't only a revolution for crash and bash. It's extremely useful to launch moves more aesthetically pleasing. However, the central contradiction of Exeter rears its head once again. This is a structure built from the forwards outwards. It's a great innovation in attack, but Exeter's contradictions, which maybe should be the new name of the club, strikes again, as you'll always be facing the most congested area of the opposition defence. As such, breaks tend to be made through temporary holes. They create small spaces and well-plugged sections by creating confusion. This means defenders are frequently able to make the ground back up. Exeter score very few tries from innovative backs play, but it's often worth a great amount of territory. And from here, Exeter use their famed patience and strike. It's a total inversion of normal rugby logic. Instead of the forwards winning you position and the backs scoring you the points, in Devon, the backs get you into the zone and the forwards finish it off. Exeter are a team who use an all-court game in such a balanced way, it makes their style of play look massively unbalanced, and it has to make them heavy favourites to take the Lauren Laverne Premiership Trophy this season and next, while Faz's Fez Army is out of the way. The other fascinating piece of attack can be found a few places further down the table in the form of the Northampton Saints, whose mascot, instead of being a racist caricature, is a dog called Bernie, who looks like he's been beaten down by spending 46 years in the job he finds no pleasure in and spends his weekends in an armchair lightly pissed whilst his wife avoids him. Much like sparks of joy in Bernie's life, Northampton Saints tries seem to come completely out of nowhere. They look like well-coordinated opportunism rather than created and designed scores, but that's because their system is built to capitalise rather than to create. The idea is to strike the moment one tackle is missed or a defender moves out of position, and any set plays are designed to manufacture that error. This allows Saints to flood through and take advantage. Because modern defences are so well drilled, invariably, once that tackle is missed, someone will drift in and cover. A missed tackle these days isn't the opening it was 10 years ago. However, it does mean your defensive system will be slightly out of sorts, and that's what Northampton are looking to exploit. So, theory is, Northampton target Diglett here, he misses the tackle, the poker defence is well drilled however, so Mudkip comes in to make the tackle. However, that means Mudkip is out of position, so Mareep has to come in and cover Mudkip's channel. Northampton aren't interested in the Diglett, it's about hitting the space Mareep would have been covering. The missed tackle has a knock-on effect on the defence, and that is what Northampton are trying to create. Flooding men into the space outside the actual hole they're making, anticipating the defence filling that the moment it's made. This is perhaps best showcased in their demolition of localish rivals Leicester Tigers, who fittingly for this fixture wore red shirts to highlight the fact their entire club is on fire. This try, eventually finished by Matt Proctor, is a case of Furbank looking like he's going to beat his fellow George, Mr. Ford, which encourages the winger to step in to help make the tackle, but it breaks the system. This was always Saints' plan. Targeting Ford was not about Ford himself. It was about twisting the Tigers' defence so that they all help Ford out. And all it takes is Furbank to continue running his previous line to turn it into an overlap that allows Proctor to score in the corner. Likewise, in the second half, Cobus Reinach beating the first man forces Tuolangi and the rest of the Tigers' defence to fly up and cover. One pass and the whole defence looks horribly disorganised as Saints players flood into the space from deep, allowing them to pick lines that correspond with how the defence fell apart. Whilst here, back in the first half, this process is inverted. Saints spread the ball wide so Manu Tuolangi flies up super aggressively to shut it down, but Hutchinson holds the ball up just a second, meaning Tuolangi has to check himself, and Yakutata come in to cover Tuolangi's space. He hits Hutchinson hard, but not before he can switch it back to Proctor, who darts right through the space that belonged to Tata. The defensive error is by Tuolangi, but the space Saints exploit is Tata's channel after he shifts to help his mate out. It's extra prescient because the Northampton team is full of threats who can cause a missed tackle and misalign their defence. Dan Bigger's been playing some top-class sex rugby. Roy Hutchinson is still slightly rough around the edges, but he has such an all-court game in the centre. Matt Proctor is very much in the no-faults Kiwi centre mould. Lieutenant Furbank still only has 2 England caps, so I'm still legally allowed to like him. And Naravora might be lazy, but at full tilt, he runs people down with the force and ferocity with which life hit Burnley. Whereas fellow top 4 dwellers Bristol are all about getting their big, fast, scary boys into space. Saints are instead trying to trap defenders using their biggest threats and then hopefully unleash a different danger man once the work has been done. Now, Leicester themselves have been proof that the dog in the iconic meme was only ever a few stripes off. The Tigers saying so confidently, "This is fine. for years now. Now, time will have to tell whether things actually begin to look fine again, but since we last checked in on Tigers on this channel, they've suffered their 2 worst seasons in their 140-year history consecutively and fired another coach, meaning Leicester have now had more top dogs without stripes over the last 3.5 years than Exeter have had since rugby turned professional. Time was, anything other than a title would have been a poor season for Tigers. Now, a mid-season finish would be a godsend. It'd be a miracle. But Steve Borthwick has been one of the best forward coaches in the world for at least half a decade at this point, and it's going to be exciting to see him step up to the top job, especially at a club so suited to the style of rugby a mauling second row forward will no doubt want to play. It's hard to do any kind of analysis considering we don't know what a Steve Borthwick team does, but lately we have known what a Leicester team does, and that's stand underneath the post and wait for the conversion. However, in their once traditional top 2 slot instead are Sale Sharks. Now, earlier this week, I made a video for BT Sport, which included the following joke. It's a very different kind of firmness that's helped the team in second hit those heights, and that team is, of course, Sale Sharks. Are we sure? Sale aren't in 6th? Is that allowed to happen? Have we checked this? Sorry, Sale aren't in... Okay, fine, right, Sale are in 2nd, okay, whatever. The morning after this video went out, and I want to make it clear, this isn't a bit, this genuinely happened, I received a phone call from an unknown number that began like this.
Hello? Is this Robbie? It's Steve Diamond, the king in the north. I've shown this video of yours to my entire squad, that tweet you did, and they've all watched it. You laughing at us being second.
I said, okay, fair enough, not entirely sure what he wanted from me. He stepped in and said,
So, thanks for that.
I began speaking in response, but he cut me off mid-sentence to say,
And enjoy the rest of your broadcasting life.
And then he hung up on me. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that last bit was supposed to be a threat, but my real takeaway from this phone call, which I repeat, genuinely Steve Diamond genuinely phoned me on Tuesday, was that if Sale Sharks do go on to win the Premiership this season, it is 100% because of the motivation I gave them. I repeat, if Sale win the Premiership, it was entirely because of me and nothing to do with Steve Diamond himself. For starters, apparently instead of training, he's spending his time chasing down the numbers of every single person who makes a throwaway joke about his club. Anyway, Rumbies. Elsewhere, Harlequins have signed Chris Ashton, who I unapologetically love, and I don't care if that means you're about to hit unsubscribe. That man runs better support lines than anyone else in the history of pro rugby I've ever seen. Bath have one of the best back rows in Europe with invincible Orc Sam Underhill, the highly underrated England international Zach Mercer, and the star of my only strong Lions opinion, Talupe Faletau, who, far as I'm concerned, has to start at 8 if the Lions want a realistic chance of beating the Springboks. And yes, I am willing to die on this, Corey. I am willing to die on this hill. Elsewhere, Wasps are currently at war with Coventry City fans on Twitter. Worcester exist. London Irish have recruited incredibly well, moved back to play in actual London, and now need to hope that leads to an actual ability to defend. Newcastle have been freshly promoted after a yo-yo pair of seasons, their best finish since the Wilkinson era, followed directly by relegation. So there's a chance they may do far better than any recently relegated side normally does. And finally, do you hear that whisper? Do you hear it? I can't say for certain, but I'm sure I heard those immortal words. It could be Gloucester's year. I mean, it almost certainly won't be, but with Saracens headed down, the Alex James Premiership is packed with not only stories, but contenders. Any of these teams making the top 4 could realistically happen, and that means almost anyone could head down. The Sean Ryder Premiership resumes on the 15th, with the new season that may just belong to Gloucester, beginning in November. 2 dates that can once again bring together and then freshly divide every rugby fan across Europe. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you especially to Lee from the Blood and Mud podcast for providing his special guest turn as the one and only Steve Diamond. That was a thing that genuinely happened, by the way. I wasn't making that up at all. Steve Diamond actually rang me on Tuesday to, I don't think you've made it in the rugby media until Steve Diamond's at least been enormously passive aggressive to you, until he's gone out of his way to tell you what he thinks of you. So really that meant a lot, and thank you to all of you, everyone that supports us on Patreon, for doing so, and especially everyone that's made it possible for me to finally get into a position in which Steve Diamond could potentially have threatened me at the end. I couldn't quite tell. So yeah, thank you for watching that. There's plenty more on the channel. There's going to be more to come. I've got the podcast series on the 2011 World Cup going as well. We're moving on to some really blinding games like Italy, Russia coming up soon. So I hope you enjoy those. There's some great guests on there. So Nick Heath, Blaine Scully, loads of people on there. Thank you very much. I'll see you for more video stuff on this channel as well as the stuff on the podcast and so on later on. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Hang on. What? Manu, I'm trying to be on my high horse on the phone. What is it? What? No, I don't know when your digs will be ready. Well, you'll have to stay living with me, won't you?